The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Rebecca Morgan's hospital bed. Sarah's fingers traced her mother's palm, the skin paper-thin and cool, smelling faintly of lavender lotion she'd applied that morning. Outside, Chicago's November wind rattled the window, carrying the scent of coming snow. Her phone buzzed, another creditor. She silenced it, focusing on her mother's shallow breathing, each exhale a reminder of why she'd walked away from her honeymoon suite 3 months ago. The nurse entered, clipboard in hand, sensible shoes squeaking against linoleum. Rebecca's vitals were stable now, the confusion from this morning's episode fading into exhausted sleep. Sarah watched the rise and fall of her mother's chest, counting breaths like rosary beads, a prayer without words. 3 months. 92 days since she'd stood in that ivory gown, champagne bubbling in crystal flutes. Ryan's hand warm against her waist as they swayed under chandeliers at the Waldorf Astoria. The reception had been perfect, white roses cascading from centerpieces, string quartet playing pachelbel, 200 guests smiling as if happiness could be bought with prime rib and an open bar. Then her phone had rung. Elena, voice cracking with panic, "Mom's missing." She walked out of Sunrise Care. "We can't find her." Sarah had turned to Ryan, still in her wedding dress, tulle pooling at her feet like spilled moonlight. "We need to go, just for a few hours. Make sure she's safe, then we'll leave for Maui." His jaw had tightened, hazel eyes going flat. "It's always her, always something." "She's confused, Ryan. She doesn't know where she is. And I'm supposed to what? Postpone our honeymoon because your mother can't remember to stay put." The words had landed like slaps. Sarah had felt the room tilt, the weight of her veil suddenly suffocating. 1 day. "I'm asking for 1 day." Ryan had grabbed his jacket, movement sharp with rage. "I can't do this. I thought I could, but I can't. You'll always choose her." He'd walked out of the reception hall, past the untouched wedding cake, past the guests, frozen mid-conversation, their champagne glasses catching light like accusations. Sarah had stood there, mascara smudging, unable to move until Elena arrived, took her hand, led her to the car where their mother sat wrapped in a stranger's coat, calling for Richard, Sarah's father, dead 8 years. The annulment papers had arrived 2 weeks later. Ryan hadn't contested, hadn't called, hadn't explained beyond that single line in the petition irreconcilable differences regarding family obligations. Sarah blinked back to the present, Rebecca's hand twitching in sleep. The hospital bill sat in her purse, $45,000 for tests, scans, medications that did nothing to slow the fog creeping through her mother's mind. Insurance covered some, but not enough. Never enough. Her phone buzzed again. Gallery director probably wondering where she was. Sarah had called in sick 3 times this week, used up all her personal days by October. The Chicago Art Institute didn't fire people for caring for sick relatives, but they didn't promote them either. Her career, once promising, had become a tightrope she walked with, weights strapped to her ankles. Rebecca's eyes fluttered open, pale blue and searching. Sweetheart Sarah leaned close, squeezing her mother's fingers. "I'm here, Mom." Rebecca smiled, lucid for the first time in hours. "You look tired. You should go home." "I will. Soon." But Rebecca's gaze had already drifted to the window where bare branches scratched against glass like skeletal fingers. "Is Richard coming?" The question carved a hollow space in Sarah's chest. She'd answered it 1,000 times, would answer it 1,000 more. "Dad's not coming, Mom. He passed away. Remember." Rebecca frowned, struggling to surface from the fog. "Oh, yes. I forgot. It's okay." But it wasn't. Nothing about this was okay. Sarah was 32, drowning in debt, clinging to a job that barely covered expenses, watching her mother disappear piece by piece while the city outside moved forward, indifferent and bright. Elena arrived at 7, still in scrubs from her shift at Northwestern Memorial, dark circles under eyes the same shape as Sarah's. "You need to eat." Sarah couldn't remember her last meal. Breakfast, maybe. Toast that had tasted like cardboard. "I'll grab something from the cafeteria." "No." Elena's voice carried the authority of a nurse who'd spent 12 hours ordering doctors around. "You're going home. I've got tonight." Sarah wanted to argue, but exhaustion pressed down like a hand on her skull. She kissed her mother's forehead, gathered her coat and purse, stepped into the hallway where the smell of antiseptic burned her nostrils. The elevator descended, stopped at the 4th floor, where a janitor wheeled in a cart, started at the 3rd, where an elderly man clutched flowers, finally opened onto the lobby, where people moved with purpose she couldn't remember feeling. Outside Chicago's loop stretched in all directions, buildings lit against early darkness. November wind cut through her coat as she walked toward the Red Line station, dodging commuters who flowed around her like water past a stone. Her reflection caught in a storefront window, pale drawn hair pulled into a knot that had given up pretense of professional. She looked like what she was, someone barely holding on. The train rattled north, fluorescent lights flickering over exhausted faces. Sarah closed her eyes, let the motion rock her toward something resembling peace. Tomorrow, she had to be at the gallery by 9. Emergency exhibition covering for a colleague who'd called in with the flu. High-stakes donors, museum board members, circling like sharks smelling opportunity. She couldn't afford another absence, another mark against her name in whatever file documented her slow professional decline. Her apartment in Lincoln Park was small, one bedroom she could barely afford, even with Elena splitting costs. She heated leftover soup, ate standing at the counter, showered until the hot water ran cold. In bed she stared at the ceiling, counting cracks instead of sheep, thinking about Ryan's words on a loop. "You'll always choose her." He'd been right. She would. Every time. But that didn't make the choosing hurt less. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of wedding gowns that turned to hospital gowns, champagne that tasted like medicine, Ryan's face dissolving into fog. Morning arrived gray and unwelcome. Sarah, dressed in black slacks and a cream blouse, applied makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes, twisted her auburn hair into a knot that suggested competence she didn't feel. The gallery director had sent 3 emails overnight, each more urgent than the last. The exhibition needed her. The donors needed her. Everyone needed something she wasn't sure she had left to give. The Chicago Art Institute rose like a temple on Michigan Avenue, twin bronze lions guarding the entrance. Sarah climbed the stairs, showed her badge, wound through marble halls toward the contemporary wing where she'd spent the morning arranging pieces for tonight's opening. Abstract paintings, sculptures, and steel and glass installations that asked questions she was too tired to answer. Her colleague had left notes color-coded, detailed, slightly panicked. The Rothko needed better lighting. The Calder should shift 3 feet left. Donor list attached, board members circled in red. Sarah scanned names, recognizing Chicago's elite tech moguls. Real estate developers, old money with new faces. One name caught her eye. Circled twice, James Alexander Hart. She knew that name. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Self-made billionaire real estate empire built on affordable housing and community development. Newspapers called him the gentleman developer, praised his insistence on green spaces and mixed-income projects, while competitors threw up luxury high-rises. He collected art donated to museums, appeared at galas with revolving dates, who never lasted past a season. Sarah had never met him. Their worlds didn't intersect, hers of gallery catalogs and grant applications, his of penthouses and private jets. But tonight, he'd be here, checkbook open, looking for something beautiful to add to whatever collection billionaires kept. She spent the day adjusting, rearranging, ensuring every piece caught light at the perfect angle. By 6, the gallery gleamed. Caterers arrived with champagne and canapes, servers in black tie threading through the space like ravens. Sarah changed in the staff bathroom, swapping her work clothes for a simple navy dress Elena had insisted she buy. Professional, elegant, forgettable. The first donors arrived at 7, air-kissing and exclaiming over the Rothko's depth, the Calder's movement. Sarah smiled, answered questions, steered conversations toward price points and provenance. Her feet ached in heels she hadn't worn since the wedding blisters forming at her ankles like small rebellions. At 7:30, James Hart walked in. Sarah noticed him the way everyone noticed him, a shift in the room's gravity, conversations, pausing mid-sentence, heads turning. He was tall, 6'2", easily, in a charcoal suit that fit like it had been sewn directly onto his shoulders. Dark hair, swept back jaw, sharp enough to cut eyes the color of winter storms. Not handsome in any soft way, but striking the kind of face that demanded attention without asking. He moved through the gallery alone, no date clinging to his arm, no entourage trailing behind. Just him and the art pausing before each piece with the intensity of someone who actually looked instead of just seeing. Sarah watched from across the room, noting the way his fingers drummed against his thigh. When he considered a purchase, the slight tilt of his head when something caught his interest. The gallery director materialized at Sarah's elbow, breath smelling of champagne and ambition. "That's James Hart. If he buys anything, we've made our quarter." Sarah nodded, about to respond, when the entrance doors burst open and chaos stumbled in. Rebecca Morgan, still in her nightgown from Sunrise Care, sensible shoes on the wrong feet, was calling for Richard in a voice that echoed off marble and steel. Sarah's stomach dropped. She crossed the gallery in 5 strides, reaching her mother as a security guard approached with hand outstretched. "Mom, how did you... Where's Richard?" Rebecca's eyes were wild, searching faces that stared with varying degrees of pity and discomfort. "He said he'd meet me here." Sarah took her mother's elbow, gentle but firm, aware of every eye in the room tracking their movement. "Let's go outside. We'll find him outside." But Rebecca pulled away, voice rising. "You're always hiding him. Where is he?" The gallery fell silent, except for Mozart playing through speakers, notes jarring against the scene unfolding. Sarah felt heat crawl up her neck, humiliation burning in her chest. She reached for her mother again, but Rebecca stumbled backward, knocking into a server whose tray of champagne flutes crashed to the floor in a crystalline explosion. Sarah's heart hammered. She knelt, grabbing her mother's shoulders. "Mom, look at me. Dad's not here. We need to go." Rebecca's face crumpled, confusion giving way to tears. "I don't understand. Where am I?" Then a voice, low and steady, cut through the noise. "May I help?" Sarah looked up. James Hart stood there, hands in pockets, expression calm, as if elderly women in nightgowns crashed gallery openings every day. She wanted to refuse to handle this herself, but Rebecca was crying and security was hovering, and she couldn't think past the shame coating her tongue. "She's confused." "I'm sorry. I'll get her out of here." James knelt beside them, eye level with Rebecca, and his voice when he spoke was gentle in a way that made Sarah's throat tighten. "Ma'am, do you like art?" Rebecca blinked, tears still wet on her cheeks. "What, the paintings?" He gestured toward the nearest piece, a Monet waterscape in blues and greens. "My mother loved Monet. She said water lilies were proof that beauty could grow in mud." Rebecca followed his gesture, focus shifting. "That's lovely. Would you like to see the rest?" James stood, offering his hand. "I find museums very peaceful. Sometimes when I'm lost, art helps me find my way." Rebecca took his hand, this stranger's hand, and let him lead her toward the Monet. Sarah rose on shaking legs, watching in disbelief as James walked her mother through the gallery, pointing out colors and brushstrokes, asking questions that Rebecca answered with increasing clarity. The fog seemed to lift, or maybe James was just skilled at navigating it. The gallery director appeared face tight with forced calm. "Is everything under control?" Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. Behind them, servers swept up, broken glass conversations resumed at lower volumes, the evening's momentum recovering from the disruption. But Sarah couldn't move, couldn't do anything except watch James Hart, billionaire stranger enigma, treat her mother with a dignity no one else in this room had offered. Elena arrived 10 minutes later, breathless and apologetic. She got past the night nurse. "I'm so sorry." Sarah waved it off, too exhausted for anger. "Just get her back." But when Elena approached, Rebecca clung to James's arm. "I'm not finished looking." James met Sarah's eyes over her mother's head, and something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition of a shared experience with loss. "It's all right. We can look a bit longer." They walked the full exhibition, James pointing out details only someone who truly studied art would notice. The way light played in the Rothko's layers, the mathematical precision of the Calder's balance. Rebecca smiled, laughed even, and for 10 minutes she was the woman she'd been before Alzheimer's stole her piece by piece. Finally, Elena coaxed her toward the door with promises of hot chocolate and the nature documentaries she loved. Rebecca hugged James, sudden and fierce. "You're a good boy. Your mother raised you right." James's expression flickered something vulnerable and raw before smoothing back to calm. "Thank you, ma'am. That means more than you know." When they'd gone, Sarah stood alone with James Hart in a gallery full of people who pretended they hadn't witnessed her humiliation. Her hands shook. She clasped them together, willing steadiness she didn't feel. "I'm sorry. That was unprofessional." James turned to face her fully, and up close she could see details the room's distance had hidden. Faint lines at the corners of his eyes, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Hands that looked like they'd done real work, not just signed checks. "Your mother has Alzheimer's." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "My mother had cancer, died when I was 15. He said it matter-of-factly, but pain threaded through the words like wire through silk. "I'd give anything for what you have, even the hard parts. That's easy to say when you're not living it." His lips curved, not quite a smile. "You're right. I don't know your struggle, but I know what it looks like when someone fights for the people they love. You handled that beautifully." Beautifully. Sarah wanted to laugh. She'd handled it like a woman drowning, gasping for air while waves pulled her under. But James's eyes held no pity, no judgment, just honest respect that made her want to believe him. The gallery director swooped in, all teeth and calculation. "Mr. Hart, have you seen anything that interests you?" James didn't look away from Sarah. "Actually, yes. All 3 pieces in the winter series. I'll take them." The director's eyes went wide. "All 3. That's $90,000. James pulled a card from his wallet, handed it over. "Bill, my office. And I'd like the curator's contact information for provenance questions." "Of course, right away." The director scurried off, probably calculating her commission. Sarah's pulse kicked. "You don't need to do that. Do what pity buy. I don't need charity." "Good." His voice carried an edge, now sharper. "Because I don't give it. I buy art I want from people who know what they're talking about. Your winter series is exceptional Chicago in January, bare trees against gray sky, beauty and bleakness. I've been looking for pieces like that for months." Sarah studied him, searching for deception and finding only certainty. "Why?" "Because most people paint spring. Hope, renewal, all that optimistic garbage. But winter is honest. It doesn't promise anything except cold. And sometimes honesty is more beautiful than hope." The words landed strange and true. Sarah had curated the winter series because she understood it barren landscapes that spoke to something hollow inside her. Hearing James name it, claim it as valuable, shifted something in her chest. "Thank you. For the purchase. And for my mother." James's expression softened. "Family first. It's rare these days. Most people I know would have been mortified, would have had security remove her. You stayed with her. That's character. Or desperation. Same thing done right." The evening wound down, donors trickling out with promises to return. Sarah's feet throbbed. Her head ached, but James's words circled in her mind like birds unable to land. Before he left, he paused at the door, turned back. "Miss Morgan." "Your name?" The director mentioned it. "Sarah. Sarah Morgan." "James." His hand extended and she took it, warm, calloused in unexpected places. A working man's hand in a billionaire's suit. "I meant what I said. You have real talent. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Then he was gone, disappearing into Chicago's night, leaving Sarah standing in an empty gallery that suddenly felt too large and too small at once. She took the red line home, exhausted and buzzing. In her apartment, Elena had left a note. "Mom's asleep. I'll stay tonight. Take care of yourself." Sarah collapsed onto the couch, kicked off her heels, and let the day's adrenaline drain. Her phone buzzed a text from the gallery director. "Hart's purchase went through. You're getting a bonus. Nice work." But it wasn't the bonus that kept Sarah awake, staring at her ceiling, counting cracks. It was the way James had looked at her mother without flinching. The way he'd spoken about winter and honesty and beauty that didn't promise anything. the way he'd seen her not as Ryan's discarded wife or a struggling curator or a daughter drowning in impossible choices, but as someone worth knowing. She fell asleep thinking about calloused hands and winter paintings about strangers who showed up when the world looked away. Morning came too fast. Sarah woke to Elena shaking her shoulder phone in hand. "Mom's fine, but you need to see this." Sarah blinked into focus. What? Elena turned the phone screen. A photo from last night's gallery opening posted by Chicago Magazine's Society page. James Hart speaking with an older woman in a nightgown, both looking at a painting. Caption: Billionaire developer James Hart shows compassion at Art Institute Gala. Sarah's stomach twisted. Great, now she was a viral moment. But Elena was scrolling reading comments. People love it. Look, this is what real wealth looks like. Hart treating everyone with dignity. More billionaires should act like this. You're not the story. He is. Sarah took the phone, scanned reactions. Elena was right. The focus wasn't on Rebecca's confusion or Sarah's humiliation. It was on James, his kindness, the way he'd transformed an awkward moment into something almost beautiful. Her phone rang. Gallery director voice, bright with opportunity. "Sarah, we need to discuss the winter series. Hart's office called. He wants to meet you to discuss commissioning more work. I'm a curator, not an artist. He specifically asked for you. Said he had questions about technique and inspiration. Can you meet him this afternoon? 3 o'clock at his office?" Sarah's pulse jumped. She should say no. She had work responsibilities, a mother who needed her. But something in her chest said yes before her brain could argue. "Where his office on Wacker? I'll text you the address." The call ended. Sarah stared at her phone, at Elena, at the ceiling that offered no answers. A meeting, professional, nothing more. But her hands were shaking, and deep in her gut she knew this wasn't about art at all. She arrived at James Hart's building at 2:50, giving herself time to compose before facing whatever this was. The lobby gleamed, marble floors, modern art on the walls, the faint scent of expensive cologne and ambition. She gave her name to security, received a visitor badge, took an elevator to the 32nd floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the Chicago River winding like a silver snake through steel and glass. The receptionist led her to a conference room. "Mr. Hart will be right with you. Can I get you anything, coffee, water?" "I'm fine. Thank you." Left alone. Sarah studied the room. More art on the walls. Local artists, she recognized some names. A bookshelf filled with architectural journals and urban planning texts. Nothing about this space screamed billionaire ego. It felt almost humble. The door opened. James entered, and Sarah's breath caught despite herself. He wore a navy suit today, white shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with muscle. Not the soft hands of someone who'd never worked. These were hands that had built things. "Miss Morgan." He smiled, and it transformed his face from striking to something warmer. "Thank you for coming." Sarah stood accepting his handshake, that same jolt of contact from last night. "Of course. Though I'm not sure what I can help with. I didn't paint those pieces." "No, but you curated them. Chose them. Saw something in them worth showing." James gestured to the table where 3 photographs lay, the winter series he'd purchased. "I want to understand why." "Why what? Why these? Why winter when everyone else sells summer?" Sarah studied the images. Bare trees, gray skies, frozen lakefront. Because winter doesn't lie. It shows you exactly what it is. No leaves to hide behind, no flowers to distract. Just bones and honesty. James's eyes locked on hers. "That's what I thought, but I wanted to hear you say it. Why does it matter?" "Because I'm building a community center in Englewood. Low-income neighborhood, lots of kids who've never seen art that looks like their lives. I want to commission pieces that show beauty in struggle. Real beauty, not manufactured hope. And I think you understand the difference." Sarah's throat tightened. A commission. Real work, real money. But more than that work that mattered. "I'm a curator. I don't have connections to artists who I want you to curate it. Find the artists, choose the pieces, build a collection that speaks truth. I'll fund it. You'll run it." The offer hung in the air like a question she didn't know how to answer. "Why me?" James leaned back, fingers drumming that same rhythm she'd noticed at the gallery. "Because last night when your world was falling apart, you didn't hide your mother. You didn't ship her off to make everyone comfortable. You stood with her. That's the kind of person I want building something for kids who need someone to stand with them." "You don't know me. I know enough." Sarah wanted to argue, to point out all the ways she was failing: the debt, the exhausted job, the mother she couldn't save. But James's expression held no doubt, only certainty that made her want to believe she was capable of more than survival. "How much time do I have?" 3 months for the initial collection. Budget's flexible. I trust your judgment. Trust. Such a small word for such a massive concept. Ryan had promised trust and delivered betrayal. But James wasn't Ryan. James had knelt beside her mother when everyone else had turned away. "I'll need to keep my gallery position. I can't afford to keep it. This is a side project. Pays $50,000 for the commission plus budget for acquisitions. $50,000. More than she made in a year at the gallery. Enough to pay medical bills, buy breathing room, stop drowning for 5 minutes. Sarah's eyes burned. "Why are you doing this?" James's jaw tightened, and for a moment she glimpsed something beneath the calm old pain carefully controlled. "Because someone helped me once when I had nothing. Because wealth means nothing if you can't build something that lasts. Because you remind me that good people still exist, and I want to bet on that." The words settled over her like a coat, warm and unexpected. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then we have a deal." She thought of Rebecca, of medical bills, of Ryan's voice saying she'd always choose her mother. She thought of James's hands, calloused and real. She thought of winter, honest and cold and beautiful. "Yes, we have a deal." James smiled, and it reached his eyes, this time genuine and bright. "Good. I'll have my assistant send over the contract details. Take your time reviewing." "And Sarah." She met his eyes. "Thank you for taking a chance on something that matters." But walking out of his office elevator, descending toward the street, Sarah realized he had it backward. He was the one taking a chance. On her. On the possibility that she was more than the sum of her struggles. Outside, November wind cut through her coat, but she barely felt it. $50,000. A project that mattered. James' heart's trust freely given. Her phone buzzed. "Elena." "How'd it go?" Sarah typed back, "I think I just got a second chance." And for the first time in 3 months, she believed it might be true. The contract arrived 3 days later, delivered by courier to the gallery where Sarah stood cataloging a new shipment of contemporary pieces. 40 pages of legal language that boiled down to this $50,000, 3 months full creative control. She signed without calling a lawyer, without second-guessing, folded the papers into her bag like a secret she wasn't ready to share. That evening she visited Sunrise Care, where Rebecca sat in the common room staring at a television she didn't seem to see. Sarah pulled a chair close, took her mother's hand. "Mom, I got a new project. Art curation for a community center." Rebecca's eyes cleared slightly, focusing on her daughter's face. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your father would be proud." Sarah didn't correct her. Let the moment exist as it was, her mother present, lucid, offering something that felt like blessing, even if memory had twisted the details. The first week passed in research. Sarah spent lunch breaks scrolling through portfolios of Chicago artists, evenings visiting studios in Pilsen and Bridgeport, weekends at open mic nights where painters displayed work on makeshift walls. She looked for truth in brushstrokes, for beauty that didn't flinch from struggle. James's assistant emailed twice, checking progress, offering resources. Sarah declined the offers, determined to prove she could handle this without hand-holding. But on Friday, James himself appeared at the gallery during her shift. He wore jeans today, a gray sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds before rain. Less billionaire, more man. Sarah's pulse kicked traitor fast. "I was nearby. Thought I'd see how the search is going." Nearby. His office was 6 blocks south, hardly a coincidence. But Sarah didn't call him on it. Instead, she led him to her desk, where she'd spread photographs of potential pieces, urban landscapes, portraits of South Side families, abstracts that captured violence and hope in equal measure. James studied each image with the same intensity he'd brought to the gallery, opening that slight head tilt when something resonated. He pointed to a painting of a young girl playing hopscotch on cracked pavement, purple flowers pushing through concrete behind her. This one. Who's the artist? Maria Gutierrez. Works out of a studio in Little Village. Day job as a teacher's aide. James's finger traced the photograph's edge. This is exactly what I meant. Beauty in the bones. Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. Validation she hadn't realized she needed. I have 10 more artists I want to visit. Should have the full collection proposal by end of month. Take your time. Quality matters more than speed. But his eyes, when they met hers, suggested time meant something different. Not deadline pressure, but opportunity. Stretching ahead days that could fill with more than work. Can I buy you coffee? He gestured toward the gallery cafe, visible through glass doors. I'd like to hear more about your vision. Sarah glanced at her supervisor across the room, absorbed in paperwork. Her shift ended in 20 minutes. She nodded. They sat at a corner table, cappuccinos steaming between them. James wrapped both hands around his mug, and Sarah noticed again those calluses, the evidence of work that went beyond signing checks. You don't fit the billionaire profile. James's eyebrow lifted, amused. And what profile is that, entourage? Trophy date. Flashy watch. He glanced at his wrist where a simple steel timepiece caught afternoon light. My dad was a firefighter. Retired now, but he spent 30 years running into burning buildings for 40 grand a year. Hard to justify a Rolex when I know what real work looks like. The answer landed honest and unexpected. Sarah sipped her coffee, tasting cinnamon and something richer underneath. How'd you end up in real estate? James leaned back and shadows crossed his face, memory surfacing. My mom got sick when I was 14. Cancer. The treatment bankrupted us, even with insurance. We lost our house, moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with another family. 6 people, 1 bathroom, walls thin enough to hear everything. Sarah's throat tightened. I'm sorry. James shrugged, but tension lived in his shoulders. She died when I was 15. Afterward, I watched my dad work doubles trying to dig us out of medical debt. I swore if I ever made money, I'd build housing people could actually afford, places where families didn't have to choose between medicine and rent. You did more than make money. His smile turned rueful. I got lucky. Right place, right time, knew how to leverage debt into assets. But luck only matters if you use it for something beyond yourself. Sarah thought of Ryan, who'd used his law degree to climb social ladders, who'd married her because she fit an image he wanted to project. James was different, wealth worn like responsibility instead of reward. What about you? James's voice pulled her back. How does an art curator end up caring for her mother full-time? The question cracked something open. Sarah set down her cup, fingers trembling slightly. My dad died 8 years ago. Heart attack, sudden. Mom was fine at first, but 2 years ago she started forgetting things. Small stuff, keys, appointments. Then bigger things. My name. His name. Where she lived. Alzheimer's. Early onset. She's 55. I moved back home because Sunrise Care costs $4 grand a month and she needs more supervision than I can afford. My sister helps when she can, but Elena works night shifts. Most of it falls on me. James's expression shifted, not pity, but recognition. And your husband? Ex-husband? Sarah's laugh came sharp and bitter. He left on our wedding night when I chose to find my mother instead of boarding a plane to Maui. Jesus. Yeah. Sarah stared into her coffee, watching foam dissolve into brown. Turns out vows don't mean much when they're inconvenient. James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried weight that suggested he understood abandonment from the inside. Some people can't handle the hard parts. Doesn't mean you deserved it. Doesn't mean I didn't either. No. James leaned forward and his intensity made Sarah's breath catch. It absolutely does mean that. Caring for your mother, sacrificing your honeymoon, that's not a flaw, that's character. And anyone who couldn't see that doesn't deserve you. The words hung between them, too honest for casual coffee, too charged with something Sarah couldn't name. She felt heat creep up her neck, awareness prickling her skin. "I should get back." Her voice came out rougher than intended. "Shift's over, but I have research tonight." James stood when she did old-fashioned manners that seemed instinctive rather than performed. "Thank you for the coffee." "And Sarah." She paused, coat half on, meeting his eyes. "I meant what I said. You're doing important work. Don't let anyone make you feel small for caring." Outside, November had deepened into December. Christmas lights strung between buildings, the smell of roasted chestnuts drifting from street vendors. Sarah walked toward the Red Line station, James's words circling in her head like birds looking for places to land. That weekend she visited Maria Gutierrez's studio. The space was cramped converted garage behind a bungalow space heater barely cutting the cold, but the walls blazed with color paintings that captured Chicago's South Side with unflinching honesty and stubborn hope. Maria herself was compact, mid-40s, paint under her fingernails and in her hair. She listened as Sarah explained, the commission eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Who's funding this James Hart?" "Developer philanthropist. I know who James Hart is. Built the affordable complex on Ashland where my sister lives. Didn't raise rent when the neighborhood gentrified." Maria crossed her arms. "Why's he want my work?" "Because it tells the truth." Maria studied Sarah, measuring sincerity against experience with people who promised much and delivered little. "What's the catch?" "No catch. 3-month timeline. Fair market price for your pieces, full credit and exposure. You keep all rights." Something shifted in Maria's posture, suspicion giving way to cautious interest. "Which piece is your choice?" "I want artists who know their own value." Maria turned to her walls, considering. Finally, she pulled down 3 paintings: the Hopscotch Girl, a portrait of an elderly man at a bus stop, an abstract in blues and grays that suggested Lake Michigan at dawn. "These. They're my Chicago. The real one, not the tourist version." Sarah photographed each piece, made notes, calculated numbers. When she offered payment, Maria hesitated. "This is really happening. Not some gallery game where you string me along and disappear." Sarah met her eyes. "I sign contracts. I keep promises. This is real." Maria's smile broke through wariness like sun through clouds. "Then let's do it." Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah visited 12 more studios. A sculptor in Bronzeville who worked in reclaimed metal. A photographer documenting Humboldt Park's changing landscape. A muralist who painted neighborhood kids as superheroes. Each artist brought pieces that honored struggle without romanticizing it, beauty that emerged from honesty rather than denial. James texted periodically brief messages that felt like checking in without hovering. "How's the search? Found anything that speaks?" His assistant sent updates on the community center's construction walls, going up windows, installed space taking shape. Sarah worked gallery shifts during the day, visited artists at night, spent weekends with Rebecca, whose good days grew rarer. Elena worried aloud that Sarah was burning out, running herself into the ground. But Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months: purpose beyond survival, momentum, carrying her forward instead of dragging her down. 10 days before Christmas, James invited her to see the community center's progress. She met him at the Englewood site where construction crews worked despite December cold breath visible in frozen air. James wore work boots and a canvas jacket, hard hat tucked under one arm. He looked like he belonged here, not in boardrooms or penthouse offices. He led Sarah through the skeleton of the building, pointing out spaces that would become classrooms, a gymnasium, a library. And here, he stopped before a long wall, currently bare drywall. "This is where your collection goes. 70 feet of space for truth and beauty." Sarah tried to picture her artist's work filling this emptiness, color and life transforming concrete into sanctuary. Her chest tightened with something that felt dangerously close to hope. "It's going to be incredible. Because of you." James turned to face her, and in the construction site's harsh light she saw exhaustion around his eyes that mirrored her own. "You could have taken my money and picked easy pieces, safe art that wouldn't challenge anyone. Instead you found artists who demand we see what we'd rather ignore." That's what you hired me for. No, I hired you because I saw someone who understood that comfort isn't kindness. You're giving these kids something better than inspiration. You're giving them mirrors. The words settled over Sarah like a blanket, warm and unexpected. Around them, construction noise, faded hammer strikes, and saw whines becoming distant soundtrack to a moment that felt suspended outside time. James stepped closer, not touching but near enough that Sarah could smell sawdust and cold air on his jacket. I want to show you something. Tomorrow, if you're free. What? Something. Trust me. Sarah thought of Ryan, who'd asked for trust and weaponized it. But James's eyes held no manipulation, just invitation. She nodded. The next morning she met him at an address on the north side. Not his office or the construction site, a small bakery tucked between a laundromat and a bodega. Hart's Family Bakery, the sign read in faded gold letters. Inside, warmth hit her like a hug. The smell of cinnamon and yeast butter and sugar filled every corner. Display cases held pastries arranged with care, apple turnovers, cinnamon rolls bigger than Sarah's fist, croissants that looked like they'd been imported from France. Behind the counter, a woman in her late 70s shaped dough with practiced efficiency. Steel gray hair pulled into a bun, flour dusting her apron, eyes sharp as razors when they landed on James. About time you showed up. I've been rolling dough since 5. James kissed her cheek, leaving a smudge of flour. Sarah suspected he'd done deliberately. Grandma, this is Sarah Morgan, the curator I told you about. Martha Hart set down her rolling pin-wiped, flour-dusted hands on her apron, studied Sarah with intensity that made medical examinations feel gentle. So you're the girl who stood by her mother when your husband ran off. Sarah blinked, caught off guard by the directness. Yes, ma'am. Good. Martha nodded, once approval given or withheld in that single gesture. Family's not convenient. Most people forget that. You didn't. James shot Sarah an apologetic look, but Sarah found herself smiling despite discomfort. Martha reminded her of Rebecca before the fog, sharp, uncompromising, secure in her own truth. Grandma runs the bakery. 3 generations of Harts have worked here. 4 if you count the summers James spent learning to knead. Martha's expression softened, pride warming the edges. This boy could have bought any bakery in Chicago. Instead, he keeps this one running at a loss because his grandfather built it 70 years ago. Some things matter more than profit. Martha snorted. Tell that to the accountant who calls monthly begging me to sell. A man entered from the back, early 60s, tall with graying hair and James's jaw. He carried a tray of fresh rolls, steam rising like small prayers. Dad. James took the tray, set it in the display case. This is Sarah. Sarah, my father Thomas, and my stepmother Grace. A woman followed, late 50s, with kind eyes and paint on her fingers. Elementary teacher, Sarah guessed before Grace confirmed it. I teach 3rd grade. James says you're bringing art to Englewood. Those kids need it desperately. Sarah felt herself swept into conversation, into the rhythm of a family that moved around each other with practiced ease. Thomas asked about her gallery work. Grace wanted to know which artists she'd chosen. Martha demanded details about Rebecca's condition with the bluntness of someone who'd lived long enough to skip pleasantries. Alzheimer's is cruel. Martha's voice lost its sharp edge, revealing granite underneath. Watched my sister disappear that way. Your mother's lucky to have you. I don't feel lucky most days. No, you feel tired. But lucky and tired aren't enemies. They're the same thing viewed from different angles. The words hit deeper than Sarah expected. Around them, the bakery hummed, customers coming and going. Thomas handling the register, Grace arranging pastries with artistic precision. This wasn't wealth or prestige. This was family, messy and real, showing up for each other in the small, daily ways that mattered. James brought out a fresh apple pie, steam escaping from lattice crust. Grandma's recipe. I add cinnamon. You add too much cinnamon. Martha swatted his hand away from the display case. But I suppose some people like it sweet enough to rot their teeth. Sarah accepted a slice fork, cutting through flaky crust to filling that tasted like autumn and comfort. The cinnamon was definitely abundant, but it worked, warmth spreading through her chest with each bite. This is incredible. Wait until you taste her cherry pie." James sat beside her at a small table, their knees almost touching. "That'll ruin you for all other desserts. Big talk from a man who burns toast." Martha's voice carried from behind the counter, but affection softened the critique. They stayed for 2 hours. Sarah learned that James spent every Sunday here baking in the back kitchen despite running a billion-dollar company. That Thomas had been a firefighter for 30 years, retired now but still volunteering. That Grace taught at a Title I school in Austin, buying school supplies with her own money when budgets fell short. That Martha had opened the bakery with her husband in 1954, kept it running after he died, refused every buyout offer that came through the door. This was James's foundation, not the wealth he'd built, but the values that built him. Sarah watched him interact with customers who called him by name, saw him slip extra pastries into bags for families who looked hungry, noticed how he moved through space with humility that came from knowing struggle firsthand. When they left, Martha pulled Sarah aside. "That boy's been alone too long. Lost his mother, nearly lost himself afterward. You're good for him. Don't let fear stop you. I barely know him. You know enough." Martha's eyes held wisdom earned through decades of watching people. "He shows you who he is every day. Question is whether you trust yourself to see it." Outside December, cold bit at exposed skin. James walked Sarah toward the Red Line station, hands in pockets, breath visible in frozen air. "Your family's wonderful. They're loud and opinionated and impossible." His smile suggested those were features, not flaws. But they show up. That's what family does. Sarah thought of Rebecca, of Elena, working doubles of the weight of care that never lightened. Not everyone's that lucky. James stopped walking, turned to face her. "But you are. You have a mother who loves you even when she doesn't remember your name. A sister who takes night shifts so you can sleep. That's not nothing. Feels like nothing some days. Then let me remind you." His voice dropped lower, intimate, despite the street noise around them. "You're building something beautiful out of struggle. You're choosing your mother every single day. You're keeping promises to people who won't remember them. That's not small. That's everything." Sarah's throat tightened, tears threatening. James lifted his hand, hesitated, let it fall back to his side as if touching her required permission he wasn't ready to ask. "I should go." Her voice came out rough. "Rebecca has a doctor's appointment at 4. "Of course." James stepped back, giving space. "But Sarah." She paused, coat pulled tight against wind. "Thank you for today, for letting me share my family with you. Thank you for inviting me." But walking toward the station, Sarah felt the weight of Martha's words. "He shows you who he is every day. Question is whether you trust yourself to see it." The week before Christmas, Sarah finalized her artist selections. 23 pieces total, a collection that captured Chicago's soul, beautiful and brutal, hopeful and honest. She presented the proposal to James at his office, spreading photographs across the conference table like cards in a game where stakes felt increasingly personal. James studied each image with that intensity she'd come to recognize, asking questions about technique and inspiration about the artists themselves and what drew Sarah to their work. When he reached the final piece, Maria's Hopscotch Girl, he paused longer than the others. "This one's my favorite. Mine too." Sarah leaned over the table close enough to catch the scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and something earthier. "She represents what the whole collection does. Beauty that refuses to be crushed." James looked up and their faces were inches apart across the table. Sarah's pulse kicked, awareness flooding through her like current through water. "You have excellent instincts." His voice came out lower than necessary, charged with something that made Sarah's breath catch. She should step back, maintain professional distance. Remember, this was work and nothing more. But her feet stayed planted, her eyes locked on his. The moment stretched elastic and fragile. Then James's phone rang, shattering whatever spell had woven itself around them. He answered, voice shifting to business crisp, and Sarah gathered her photographs with hands that trembled slightly. When he hung up, the moment had passed. James signed off on the collection authorized payment to the artists, set a timeline for installation. Professional, appropriate, safe. But walking out of his office, Sarah felt the ghost of almost contact, the heat of proximity that had suggested possibilities she wasn't ready to name. Christmas arrived cold and bright. Elena insisted on decorating their apartment, a small tree strung with lights they'd had since childhood. Stockings hung despite no fireplace, cookies baked from their mother's recipe that Rebecca no longer remembered making. On Christmas Eve, Sarah brought Rebecca home for dinner. Her mother had a good day, lucid enough to recognize the apartment, to smile at decorations, to hum carols while Elena mashed potatoes. They ate at the small table that barely fit 3 ham glazed with brown sugar and cloves, green beans with almonds, sweet potatoes topped with marshmallows that went golden under the broiler rolls so soft they dissolved on the tongue. Simple food, nothing fancy, but it tasted like home. Rebecca looked around the table, clarity shining through the fog. "This is nice, having my girls together." Sarah's eyes burned. She reached across the table, squeezed her mother's hand. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Then Rebecca's gaze went distant again, clarity fading like sunset into night. But for 10 minutes she'd been present. For 10 minutes they'd been whole. After dinner, after Rebecca had gone back to Sunrise Care with promises to visit again soon, Elena cornered Sarah in the kitchen while washing dishes. "You're different lately." Sarah scrubbed at a stubborn pan, avoiding her sister's eyes. "Different? How lighter? Less like you're carrying the weight of the world." Elena rinsed suds from a plate. "Does this have anything to do with the billionaire art collector who keeps finding reasons to see you?" "It's professional." "Right." Elena's skepticism could cut glass. "Because billionaires personally deliver coffee to curators all the time. He brought coffee once. Twice. I saw the cup on your desk last Thursday. His assistant called it a delivery from Mr. Hart." Sarah set down the pan, faced her sister. "What's your point?" "My point is you like him. And that terrifies you because Ryan." "This isn't about Ryan. Everything's about Ryan until you let it not be." Elena dried her hands, expression softening. "James seems like a good man. He showed up when Mom had her episode. He's funding work you believe in. He looks at you like you're the only person in the room. He does not. He absolutely does. And you look back the same way." Elena's voice dropped, gentleness replacing edge. "It's okay to want something for yourself, to let someone in who might actually stay." Sarah's defenses crumbled, exhaustion and hope warring in her chest. "What if I'm wrong again? What if I trust him and he leaves? Then you'll survive. Like you survived Ryan. Like you survive every hard thing." Elena pulled Sarah into a hug. "But what if you're right? What if he's exactly who he seems? Are you really going to let fear choose for you?" The question followed Sarah into January, when winter locked Chicago in ice and gray. The community center neared completion, walls, painted floors, polished, the art installation scheduled for mid-month. Sarah coordinated with artists, arranged delivery, spent hours ensuring each piece would hang perfectly in the space James had created. On installation day, James showed up in jeans and a flannel shirt, ready to work. He hauled frames, climbed ladders, held pieces while Sarah determined exact placement. They worked side by side, shoulders brushing, conversation flowing easy as breath. A little left. Sarah directed from floor level while James held a large canvas. "Perfect. Right there." He secured the piece, climbed down, stood beside her to assess. "Maria's going to love this. They all will." Sarah turned to survey the full installation, 70 feet of truth and beauty, struggle and hope, captured in paint and metal and light. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? Mirrors for kids who never see themselves reflected." James's voice came quiet, reverent. "It's better than I imagined. Because you understood the assignment wasn't inspiration, it was recognition." Sarah felt pride swell in her chest, validation deeper than any gallery praise. This mattered, not to critics or collectors, but to the kids who'd walk these halls and see their lives honored instead of erased. They broke for lunch, eating sandwiches from a deli down the block while sitting on the center's front steps. Chicago's January wind cut brutal and sharp, but the sun offered weak warmth between gusts. James unwrapped his sandwich, took a bite, spoke around food in a way that felt unguarded. "My dad called this morning. Wants to know if you're coming to Sunday dinner." Sarah's heart jumped. "Am I invited? Grandma insists. Says she needs a woman with sense to balance out the testosterone." His smile turned shy, a crack in the confidence he usually wore. "I'd like you to come, if you want." Sarah thought of Martha's sharp wisdom, Thomas's quiet strength, Grace's kindness. She thought of the bakery's warmth, the easy rhythm of family that showed up for each other. She thought of James's hand almost touching hers, of moments charged with possibility neither had named. "I'd like that." The words came simpler than she expected, truth without hedge or qualification. James's smile widened, genuine and bright, and Sarah felt something shift between them. Invisible line crossed, new territory entered. Sunday arrived clear and cold. Sarah dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual, settling on dark jeans and a cream sweater that Elena declared perfect. She took the red line north, walked 3 blocks to the address James had texted, stood outside the modest 2-story house trying to calm nerves that felt absurd given she'd met his family already. The door opened before she knocked. Grace stood there, paint still on her fingers from whatever art project she'd been helping 3rd graders complete. "You're here. Come in. It's freezing." Inside, warmth wrapped around Sarah like a hug, the smell of roasting meat, baking bread, something sweet underneath. Voices from the kitchen, Martha directing Thomas, protesting James, laughing at whatever argument they were having. Grace led her to the dining room where the table was set for 6. "Who's the 6th, Elena?" James appeared in the doorway, apron tied over his jeans, flour on his cheek. "I hope you don't mind. I invited your sister when I learned she had the night off." Sarah's chest tightened, emotion too large to name. He'd thought of Elena included her, understood that family meant both of them. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." James's eyes held hers, serious beneath the flour smudge. "Your family matters. I want to know the people who made you." Elena arrived 10 minutes later, bearing wine and the slightly manic energy of someone who'd slept 4 hours between shifts. Martha immediately put her to work mashing potatoes, declaring that nurses had the arm strength for proper consistency. Dinner assembled slowly, everyone helping, moving through the kitchen with choreography born from repetition. Sarah found herself chopping vegetables beside Grace, listening to stories about 3rd graders who thought Chicago was a country and Alaska was a planet. Thomas carved the roast, thick slices falling away from the bone juice pooling on the platter. James worked beside Martha on rolls, his cinnamon edition, earning the same critique it always did. Finally they sat. The table groaned under food's weight, pot roast so tender it fell apart at forks, touch carrots and onions that had cooked in the meat's juices until sweet buttery egg noodles in mountains of white roasted root vegetables caramelized to candy fresh bread, steaming when torn open, butter melting into soft centers. Thomas said grace, brief, heartfelt, thanking God for family old and new, for second chances and open doors. Then chaos, plates passing, food piled high. Conversation flowing like wine from the bottle Elena had brought. Sarah watched James interact with his family, noting gentleness with Martha, easy banter with Thomas, the way he made sure Grace got the end piece of roast she preferred. This was who he was beneath the suits and boardrooms, a man who showed up on Sundays, who baked with too much cinnamon, who honored the people who'd raised him. Elena fit seamlessly, trading nursing horror stories with Grace's teaching ones, making Martha laugh with impressions of difficult doctors. Sarah felt herself relax into the evening, the weight she carried daily lightening in the presence of people who chose joy despite knowing struggle. After dinner, James and Sarah washed dishes while others moved to the living room. Domestic intimacy. His hands in soapy water, hers drying plates worn smooth by decades of use. Conversation unnecessary but comfortable in its absence. James broke the silence first. "Your sister's wonderful. She keeps me sane." Sarah set a dried plate on the stack. "When Mom got sick, Elena could have run, moved away, built a life that didn't include late-night calls and emergency room visits. She stayed. Family does that." James rinsed the last pot, handed it to her. At least the good ones do. Their fingers brushed during the handoff contact, brief but electric. Sarah's breath caught awareness flooding through her. James didn't pull away immediately, letting the moment stretch, testing boundaries neither had defined. Sarah. His voice came low, intimate, despite others in the next room. I want to be honest about something. Her pulse kicked. Okay. This isn't just about the art project anymore. For me, I don't know when it shifted, but somewhere between the gallery and today, it became about you. The confession hung between them, vulnerability offered without guarantee of safety. Sarah set down the dish towel, turned to face him fully. I know. Her voice trembled slightly. I feel it too, and it scares me. Because of Ryan, because I trusted someone who left, because I'm barely keeping my head above water most days, because you're you and I'm exactly who I want. James stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that Sarah could feel heat radiating from him. I'm not asking you to have all the answers. I'm asking if you're willing to try. Sarah thought of Martha's words. He shows you who he is every day. She thought of winter paintings, honest and cold and beautiful. She thought of James kneeling beside her mother of Sunday dinners and too much cinnamon of hands that built things instead of just buying them. Yes. The word came out barely above a whisper. I'm willing to try. James's smile broke through tension like sunrise, genuine and bright. Then let's start there. He reached for her hand, lacing fingers through hers, contact that felt monumental in its simplicity. They stood in his family's kitchen, dish soap and roast beef scent surrounding them. Other voices drifting from the living room, and Sarah felt something she hadn't felt since before Ryan left, hope that didn't hurt, possibility that didn't demand she choose between herself and others. The evening wound down in laughter and full stomachs. Martha sent everyone home with leftovers packed in containers. She refused to let them return. Elena hugged Sarah in the car, voice soft with understanding. He's good. Don't let fear ruin this. Sarah held her sister's words against the doubt that crept in during quiet moments during the week that followed, when work and worry threatened to drown possibility and practical concerns. But James texted daily, nothing demanding, just small connections. Morning coffee orders that matched her preference exactly. Photos from the community center where finishing touches transformed space into sanctuary. A recipe for apple pie with a note. Grandma says I'm still using too much cinnamon, trying to prove her wrong. Sarah found herself smiling at her phone, responding with her own small shares. Artists she'd discovered, exhibitions worth seeing, photos of Rebecca on good days when the fog lifted. Friday evening, James called instead of texting. I want to take you somewhere tomorrow, if you're free. Where? It's a surprise. Trust me. Sarah thought of trust, how Ryan had weaponized it, how James kept earning it through small consistencies. She said yes. Saturday morning arrived with snow falling soft and steady, coating Chicago in white that would turn gray by afternoon. James picked Sarah up at 10, driving a truck, instead of the town car she'd half expected, practical vehicle with salt stains on the fenders and a toolbox rattling in the bed. Where are we going? You'll see. His smile suggested secrets he was enjoying keeping. They drove north through neighborhoods Sarah recognized, then ones she didn't, finally pulling up to a warehouse in Ravenswood. James killed the engine, came around to open her door. Inside, the warehouse had been converted into workshop space. The smell of sawdust and linseed oil filled the air, mixing with the sharper scent of varnish. Woodworking equipment lined the walls, table saws and planers, sanders and drills, tools Sarah couldn't name but recognized as expensive. This is where I come when boardrooms feel like cages. James ran his hand along a workbench scarred with use. Started coming here after my mom died. Something about building with my hands helped when words didn't work. Sarah moved through the space, noting half-finished projects on various tables. A rocking chair taking shape, spindles waiting to be sanded smooth, a jewelry box with intricate inlay work, a hope chest, the piece James had mentioned at the bakery. You made all this therapy that produces furniture. James picked up a piece of sandpaper, ran it along the hope chest's edge with practiced strokes, cheaper than a psychiatrist and more useful. Sarah watched his hands move those calluses, making sense now. This wasn't hobby or affectation. This was how he processed grief, how he made sense of loss that had no logic. "What are you working on now?" He gestured toward a corner where wood lay stacked cherry and walnut, maple and oak. "I want to build something for the community center. Tables for the art room, maybe. Places where kids can create." "Can I help?" James looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "You want to? I don't know how. But I'd like to learn." His smile, when it came, transformed his whole face, pleasure and possibility mixing. "Then let's start simple." He found safety goggles, positioned Sarah at the sanding station, showed her how to work with the grain instead of against it. The motion felt meditative, repetitive strokes that smoothed rough edges, revealed beauty hiding beneath surface imperfection. They worked for hours, conversation flowing easy between stretches of comfortable silence. James told stories about learning carpentry from his grandfather, about the summer he'd spent building a treehouse that collapsed the first time he climbed into it. Sarah shared memories of her father teaching her to see art in everyday objects, how he'd taken her to the Art Institute every Sunday until she knew each painting like family. The snow kept falling outside, visible through high windows, muffling the city in white silence. Inside the workshop, dust motes danced in pale light. Wood shavings curled at their feet, and Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, tension she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it wasn't permanent. Around 3, James wiped sawdust from his forehead, leaving a smudge that made him look younger. Hungry. They drove to a diner on Lincoln Avenue, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and laminated menus offering breakfast all day. James ordered coffee and pineapple with vanilla ice cream cinnamon, heavy enough that Sarah could smell it across the table. "Let me guess, you added extra. Just being consistent." He took a bite, closed his eyes in exaggerated pleasure. Perfection. Sarah ordered hot chocolate topped with whipped cream, felt sugar, and warmth spread through her. Outside Chicago moved past the window, people bundled against cold cars navigating slush life, continuing its relentless forward motion. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah wrapped both hands around her mug, using it to ground herself. "Why me? You could have anyone. Models, lawyers, women who don't come with medical debt and complicated family situations." James set down his fork, expression turning serious. "Because those women bore me. Because I've dated people who wanted the money and the status but couldn't care less about who I actually am." He leaned forward, intensity making Sarah's pulse kick. "You see me, Sarah. Not the bank account or the headlines. You see the guy who uses too much cinnamon and builds furniture to process feelings. That's worth more than beauty or convenience." The words landed deeper than compliments, reaching places Ryan had hollowed out and left empty. Sarah's throat tightened. "I'm scared." The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Of getting this wrong again. Of trusting someone who'll decide I'm too much work. James reached across the table, took her hand. His palm felt warm, solid, real. "I can't promise I'll never mess up. Can't guarantee we won't have hard days. But I can promise I'm not running. I saw what you're dealing with, and I'm still here. That's not changing." "How can you be sure?" "Because I know what loneliness looks like. Spent 15 years building walls so high nobody could reach me. Then you walked into that gallery with your mother and something shifted. I don't want walls anymore. I want this messy and complicated and real." Sarah felt tears threaten, blinked them back. "What if my mother gets worse? What if the debt becomes unbearable? What if—" "Then we'll handle it together." James squeezed her hand. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore. I'm asking you to let me help shoulder the weight." The offer hung between them, invitation to trust that terrified and tempted in equal measure. Sarah thought of Elena's words. What if you're right? What if he's exactly who he seems? She squeezed back. "Okay, let's try this. Really try." James's smile could have powered the city. They finished their pie, his cinnamon heavy and hers plain, and Sarah felt the shift from possibility to decision, from maybe to yes. The following week passed in a blur of work and new rhythms. James showed up at the gallery during her lunch breaks, bringing sandwiches they'd eat on a bench outside despite January cold. He texted her photos from board meetings with captions that made her laugh, old men arguing about things that don't matter while pretending they do. She sent him pictures of art pieces she was considering for spring exhibitions, valued his opinion despite him insisting he just liked what he liked without understanding why. They fell into patterns that felt dangerously like relationship dinner twice that week, James cooking at his penthouse because Sarah admitted she survived on frozen meals and takeout. He made pasta from scratch, kneading dough with the same focus he brought to woodworking sauce simmering on the stove, filling his kitchen with the smell of garlic and tomatoes and basil. Sarah watched him move through his space, noting that despite its size and luxury, the penthouse felt lived in rather than staged. Books stacked on tables, plants thriving near windows, photographs of his family scattered throughout. This was a home, not a showpiece. After dinner, they sat on his couch overlooking the city, Chicago's lights spreading below like fallen stars. James poured wine, and they talked until midnight about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, fears they'd never named aloud, dreams they'd abandoned or were still chasing. I wanted to be an artist. Sarah's confession surprised her vulnerability she hadn't planned. Before my dad died, I painted. Not well, but it made me happy. After he was gone, I couldn't anymore. Like that part of me died with him. James's arm rested along the couch back, not touching her, but close. What would you paint now, if you could? Sarah considered watching snow begin to fall beyond windows. Winter, the truth of it, beauty that doesn't apologize for being hard, then paint it. James's voice carried certainty that made her want to believe. You're giving other artists space to create. Why not give yourself the same gift? Because I'm not good enough. Says who? Says everyone who never bought my work. Says the voice in my head that sounds like my dad telling me art doesn't pay bills. James shifted, turned to face her fully. Your dad was wrong. Art pays in ways money can't measure, and you're good enough because you have something to say. That's all that matters. His hand found hers, fingers lacing together, and Sarah felt the now familiar jolt of contact. But this time she didn't pull away, didn't question or second guess. She leaned into him, let her head rest against his shoulder, felt his arm come around her solid and warm. They stayed like that while snow fell and the city glowed, and something between them deepened into territory that felt both terrifying and inevitable. The community center opened on a Friday in late January winter sun, breaking through clouds for the first time in days. Local news covered the event, cameras capturing kids from the neighborhood exploring the new space, running fingers along Sarah's art installation, seeing themselves reflected in images that honored their lives. James stood beside the mayor for the ribbon cutting, but his eyes kept finding Sarah in the crowd. She watched him navigate speeches and handshakes, saw how he deflected credit toward the construction crew and donors, how he knelt to talk with children at their eye level instead of towering above. Afterward, when politicians and press had left, James found Sarah in the art room where Maria's hopscotch girl hung, bathed in natural light. We did it. His voice carried satisfaction deeper than professional success. You did it. I just chose the art. No. James moved to stand beside her, both of them studying the painting. You understood what this needed to be. Not inspiration or charity, but recognition. You gave these kids mirrors. That was always the goal. A girl no older than 8 approached, tugging her mother's hand, pointing at the hopscotch painting. That's like our street. That's where I play. The mother smiled, tired but genuine. It's beautiful, baby. Sarah watched the girl study the painting, saw recognition bloom across her face, the understanding that her life, her neighborhood, her daily reality was worthy of art and attention. This was why the project mattered, not for accolades or publicity, but for moments like this, where kids learned they were worth seeing. James's hand found Sarah's squeezed once. Worth it. Every second. They stayed until the center closed, watching families explore, listening to laughter echo off walls that had been empty 3 months ago. Driving home through Chicago's winter darkness, Sarah felt accomplishment settle warm in her chest. That night, Elena called with news that made Sarah's accomplishment curdle into fear. Mom had another episode. Bad one. They're running tests. Sarah met her sister at the hospital, that familiar fluorescent lighting and antiseptic smell triggering memories of too many similar nights. Rebecca lay in the bed, sleeping fitfully, monitors beeping steady rhythm. The doctor pulled them aside, young, tired, delivering news with practiced gentleness. The Alzheimer's is progressing faster than we'd hoped. We're seeing significant decline in cognitive function, memory loss accelerating. I'd recommend considering full-time care sooner rather than later. The words landed like blows. Sarah's knees went weak and Elena's hand on her arm kept her standing. How long Elena's nurse training kicked in, asking questions Sarah couldn't form. Hard to say. 6 months, maybe a year before she needs round-the-clock supervision. Could be faster. Sarah nodded, numb. They sat with Rebecca until dawn, taking turns dozing in the uncomfortable chair, holding her hand through confusion and fear. James texted at 7. Saw the news about the center on morning shows. You're amazing. Sarah stared at her phone, at normal life continuing while hers fractured. She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on thanks. At hospital with Mom. Bad night. His response came immediately. On my way. She wanted to tell him not to come, that she could handle this alone, but exhaustion and fear made her selfish. She needed him, even if admitting it felt like weakness. James arrived 40 minutes later, coffee in hand, still wearing yesterday's clothes, like he'd driven straight from wherever he'd been. He handed Sarah the cup, light cream, no sugar, exactly right, and sat beside her without demanding explanations. Rebecca woke around 9, confused and calling for Richard. Sarah held her mother's hand, whispering reassurances that felt like lies. Dad's not here, Mom. But I am. I'm here. Rebecca's eyes cleared momentarily, focusing on Sarah's face. You're tired, sweetheart. I'm okay. No, you're not. Rebecca's lucidity felt sharp enough to cut. You're exhausted and scared and trying to be strong for everyone. But who's being strong for you? The question broke something in Sarah. Tears came sudden and overwhelming, months of held grief pouring out. James's arm came around her, pulling her against his chest, and she let herself cry ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. When the storm passed, Sarah pulled back, wiping her face with embarrassment burning her cheeks. Sorry. That was human. James's voice held no judgment. You're allowed to fall apart. That's what I'm here for. Elena took over Rebecca duty, sending Sarah home to shower and sleep. James drove her to her apartment, walked her to the door despite her insistence she was fine. Get some rest. I'll check on you later. But Sarah couldn't face being alone with her thoughts, with the doctor's timeline echoing in her head. Stay. Please. Something shifted in James's expression. Tenderness mixed with something deeper. Of course. Inside Sarah's apartment looked smaller with him in it, his presence filling space that usually felt too empty. She made tea, neither of them drank, then gave up pretense and led him to the couch where they'd sat countless times before. I'm losing her. The words came out flat, exhaustion leaching emotion. 6 months, maybe less, and she won't know me anymore. James pulled her close, and Sarah let herself be held, finding comfort in his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. I'm sorry. That's not fair. None of this is fair. My dad dying young, Mom getting sick, Ryan leaving, feeling like I'm drowning while everyone else breathes fine. You're not drowning. You're swimming against current that would pull most people under. There's a difference. Doesn't feel different. James's hand stroked her hair, rhythmic and soothing. What do you need? Tell me how to help. Sarah considered. What she needed was impossible. Her mother healthy, her father alive. Certainty that choosing love wouldn't end in abandonment. But what she could ask for felt almost as important. Just stay. Don't leave yet. I'm not going anywhere. They lay on the couch, Sarah curled against James's chest, his arms around her solid and warm. She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, and for the first time in weeks, nightmares didn't come. Sarah woke hours later to find James still there watching her with expression she couldn't quite read. Afternoon light filtered through windows, painting him in gold and shadow. "Hi." Her voice came out rough with sleep. "Hi yourself." He brushed hair from her face, touch gentle. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck." "But better than before." James sat up, pulling her with him. "I need to tell you something, and I want to be completely honest." Sarah's stomach dropped, fear immediate and visceral. "What?" "When I met you, I knew you were Ryan's ex-wife." The confession hung between them, and Sarah's mind raced, trying to understand implications. "You knew?" "Not at first. Not at the gallery. But when the director mentioned your name, I recognized it from paperwork. Ryan owes my company money from a failed deal 5 years ago. I'd been ignoring the debt, but when I realized you were his ex-wife, I looked into it." Sarah pulled back, processing. So this whole thing, the art commission, the dinners, all of it was about Ryan. Numbered, James's voice turned urgent, desperate for her to understand. "I'm explaining this badly. Yes, I knew about Ryan, but I pursued the debt collection because I was angry he'd hurt you, not because I cared about the money. And everything between us, the project, the time together, how I feel about you, that has nothing to do with him." How can I know that Sarah's voice rose, panic threading through? How can I trust that I'm not just another piece in whatever game you're playing with my ex-husband? Because I'm telling you. Because I could have kept this secret and you never would have known. But I don't want lies between us. James grabbed her hands, holding tight. "Ryan's debt means nothing. I was planning to forgive it regardless. You're what matters." Sarah wanted to believe him, but Ryan's betrayal was too fresh, the memory of being used too sharp. "I need to think." "Of course." James stood, ran a hand through his hair. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk." He left, and Sarah sat in silence that felt heavier than before. Her phone showed texts from Elena Mom's stable asking about Sarah, but Sarah couldn't focus on anything except James's confession circling in her head. She called Elena that evening, needing her sister's perspective. James knew about Ryan, the whole time. Elena listened as Sarah explained, then asked the question Sarah had been avoiding. "Do you think he's been using you?" "I don't know." Sarah's voice cracked. "He says no, but how can I be sure?" "What does your gut tell you? That I'm terrified of being wrong again?" "That's not what I asked." Elena's voice gentled. "Forget Ryan. Forget fear. What does your gut say about James?" Sarah closed her eyes, thinking of Sunday dinners and woodworking workshops, of James kneeling beside her mother and bringing coffee every morning. She thought of his hands building things instead of just buying them, of the way he deflected credit and showed up when life got hard. That he's telling the truth. That he's not Ryan. Then trust yourself. You survived one betrayal. You'll survive another if it comes. But are you really going to let Ryan's shadow destroy something good? The question kept Sarah awake half the night. By morning, she'd made her decision. She texted James, "Can we talk?" and he responded immediately. Where and when they met at the workshop in Ravenswood, neutral territory, where honesty felt easier. James stood at his workbench, sanding the hope chest with single-minded focus. He looked up when Sarah entered, expression guarded and hopeful. "I'm still angry you didn't tell me sooner." Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt. "And I'm scared you're not being completely honest about your motivations." "I understand." James set down the sandpaper, faced her fully. "What can I do to prove this is real?" "Nothing. There's no proof, no guarantee. That's what trust means, choosing to believe without certainty." "So what are you saying?" Sarah crossed the workshop floor, closing distance between them. "I'm saying I choose to trust you. Not because I'm sure you won't hurt me, but because the alternative is letting fear make my choices. And I'm done with that." James's expression cracked relief and something deeper flooding through. "You mean it?" "I mean it. But I need you to understand, if you're lying, if this is some game with Ryan, it will destroy me." "It's not. I swear on everything I have." James reached for her hands, holding them like promises. "Ryan is nothing to me. You're everything." The words settled over Sarah, and she felt the last of her resistance crumble. She stepped closer, and James met her halfway, pulling her into his arms. They held each other in the workshop's dusty light, surrounded by wood shavings and unfinished projects, and Sarah felt something shift from trying to choosing from possibility to commitment. "I love you." The confession slipped out before Sarah could stop it, truth too large to contain. James pulled back just enough to see her face, eyes searching hers. "Say it again." "I love you." "Messy and complicated and scared out of my mind. But I love you." His smile could have lit the city. "I love you too. Have since you stood up for your mother in that gallery." "I just didn't know how to say it." Then he kissed her, and Sarah felt the world narrow to this, his mouth on hers, gentle and fierce hands cupping her face like she was something precious. She kissed back, pouring months of loneliness and hope into contact that tasted like future instead of past. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight. Not because I'm asking for anything, but because I don't want to be apart. Okay?" The word came easy, decision made without second guessing. They drove to his penthouse as evening fell, Chicago's lights beginning their nightly dance. Inside, James cooked dinner while Sarah sat at his kitchen island watching him move through familiar motions. Pasta again, sauce bubbling on the stove, the smell of garlic and basil filling the air. After dinner, they settled on the couch with wine and conversation that flowed easier than before, barriers down, and truth flowing free. Sarah told him about her fear of losing Rebecca, of watching her mother disappear piece by piece. James shared memories of his own mother's final days, pain he'd buried for 20 years, surfacing in the safety of Sarah's presence. Around midnight, James offered his hand. "Come to bed. Not for anything except sleep. I just want to hold you." Sarah took his hand, let him lead her to his bedroom where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. He gave her clothes to sleep in, soft t-shirt that smelled like him, flannel pants that pooled at her ankles. They climbed into bed, and Sarah curled against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "Thank you," her voice came out, sleepy edges blurring, "for staying when I pushed you away. Always." James's arms tightened around her. "I'm not going anywhere." Sarah fell asleep to that promise, and for the first time since Ryan left, she believed in forever that didn't hurt. Morning arrived, gentle winter sun filtering through windows. Sarah woke to find James watching her, expression soft with affection that made her heart stutter. "What?" She touched her face, suddenly self-conscious. "Do I have drool or something?" "No, you're just beautiful. And I wanted to see you wake up in my bed. Smooth talker, only telling the truth." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her mouth. Brief contact that promised more without demanding. Breakfast. They cooked together, James making eggs while Sarah handled toast, moving around each other with ease that felt earned instead of forced. They ate at his kitchen table overlooking the city, and Sarah thought about how different this was from Ryan, whose kisses had felt performative, whose promises had evaporated under pressure. James was solid, real, someone who showed up when life got hard instead of running when it got inconvenient. Her phone rang. "Elena. Mom's asking for you. She's lucid today." Sarah met James's eyes. "I need to go to the hospital. I'll drive you." At the hospital, Rebecca sat propped in bed, clarity shining through the fog. She smiled when Sarah entered, real recognition instead of confusion. "There's my girl." Then her gaze landed on James behind Sarah. "And who's this?" "This is James." Sarah took her mother's hand, squeezed gently. "He's important to me." Rebecca studied James with sharp eyes that saw too much. "You're the one who helped me at that art show. The kind one." "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Rebecca nodded approval. "Sarah needs someone kind. Her father was kind. She deserves the same." James moved to Rebecca's bedside, took her other hand. "She deserves everything good this world has to offer, and I'm going to do my best to give it to her." Rebecca's eyes filled, and Sarah realized her mother understood this was likely her last lucid conversation, final chance to give blessing or warning. Make her happy. That's all I want. I will. I promise. Rebecca looked between them, then squeezed both their hands. Good. Now someone tell me what day it is. I keep losing track. They spent the afternoon with Rebecca sharing stories and laughter, pretending the fog wouldn't return. When it did, Rebecca asking for Richard again, confusion replacing clarity. Sarah and James stayed until she slept. Outside the hospital, Chicago's winter evening had turned the sky purple and gold, last light clinging to buildings before night claimed them. James pulled Sarah close, and she leaned into him, grateful for steadiness when everything else felt uncertain. Thank you for being here. Where else would I be? Anywhere else. This isn't glamorous or fun. It's watching my mother disappear. James turned her to face him, hands on her shoulders. I'm not here for glamorous. I'm here for you. All of it, the hard parts and the beautiful parts and everything in between. Sarah felt tears threaten, blinked them back. I don't know how long I can do this. Watching her fade, knowing I can't stop it. Then we'll figure it out together. You're not alone anymore. The words wrapped around Sarah like armor protection against fear that threatened to swallow her whole. She kissed him there on the sidewalk, not caring who saw, pouring gratitude and love into contact that tasted like promise. 2 weeks later, Ryan appeared. Sarah was leaving the gallery after a long shift when he materialized from shadows, looking diminished, suit-wrinkled eyes bloodshot, desperation radiating from him like heat. Sarah, we need to talk. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't seen him since the annulment, hadn't wanted to. No, we don't. Please, 5 minutes. Ryan blocked her path, not threatening but insistent. It's about James Hart. What about him? He's using you. To get to me. Ryan's voice cracked, fear bleeding through. I owe him money from a deal that went bad. He's been ignoring it for years, but suddenly he's pushing for payment, right after you started seeing him. You don't think that's a coincidence? Sarah's pulse kicked, James's confession echoing in her head. I know about the debt. He told me. And you're okay with it, with being a pawn in whatever revenge he's planning? I'm not a pawn. Sarah's voice turned cold. I'm a person who made my own choices. James didn't manipulate me into anything. You're naive. Ryan grabbed her arm, gripped tight enough to hurt. Hart doesn't care about you. He cares about destroying me. Let go. Sarah yanked her arm free, anger replacing fear. Even if that were true, why would I care? You left me, Ryan, on our wedding night. You don't get to suddenly care who I'm seeing. I made a mistake. Ryan's voice rose, drawing attention from passers-by. I was angry and stupid, but I loved you. Love you. We can fix this if you just... No. Sarah cut him off, years of hurt crystallizing into clarity. You loved the idea of me, the woman who'd fit into your life without demanding anything. But I'm not that person. I never was. Sarah, please. Goodbye, Ryan. She walked past him toward the Red Line station, refusing to look back. But his words followed her home, planting seeds of doubt that sprouted despite her attempts to uproot them. What if he was right? What if James had been using her all along? She called Elena, needing perspective. Ryan showed up. Claims James is using me to get revenge. Is he? Elena's question came gentle but direct. James says no, says he was going to forgive the debt anyway. Do you believe him? Sarah thought of workshops and Sunday dinners, of James holding her while she cried, of promises made without pressure. Yes, I do. Then Ryan's opinion doesn't matter. But the doubt lingered, poisoning quiet moments with questions Sarah hated herself for asking.